Liam, let's get married again. Sarah Quinn stood at the entrance to my office, her face a carefully constructed mask of exhaustion, her eyes holding a trace of what she believed was heart-wrenching vulnerability. 3 years. She hadn't changed a bit. She still thought that pathetic act could make me go soft. Too bad for her. The Liam Foster she could easily manipulate had died 3 years ago. I didn't say a word. I leaned back in my six-figure Herman Miller chair, my fingertips drumming a silent rhythm on the polished obsidian desktop. My gaze went past her, over the sprawling, open-plan office behind her. This was the top floor of One Vanderbilt, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering expanse of Midtown Manhattan. A far cry from the sub-1000 square foot startup space we once had, where we had to scrape by just to make rent. Sarah's eyes flickered. The sheer luxury of the office had clearly stunned her. She must have shown up expecting to find me still struggling in that run-down building in Queens. Liam, I know I was wrong, she said, taking a few steps forward when I didn't respond. Her voice softened, catching with a manufactured sob. Not a day has gone by in these 3 years that I haven't thought about you. Alex, he's a monster. He scammed me. Our son. Stop. My voice, when I finally spoke, was glacial. Miss Quinn, I believe you're mistaken about a few things. My assistant, Chloe Vance, entered at that precise moment, perfectly on cue, holding a cup of freshly brewed Blue Mountain coffee. She was dressed in an impeccable business suit, her demeanor crisp and professional. She glanced at Sarah without a flicker of emotion before asking me, in a formulaic tone, Mr. Foster, should I call security? The color drained from Sarah's face. She hated being ignored, especially by a younger, more beautiful woman. Who are you? I'm speaking to my husband. Does this concern you? She snapped, turning her venom on Chloe. I laughed. Husband. I stood up and walked over to her, looking down at the woman who had shattered my world. First, we divorced 3 years ago. Your signature on the papers dried faster than the ink. Second, I gestured to the company nameplate at the door. This is Far Harbor Capital, not that little garage startup we call Clear Harbor Tech. And third, and most importantly, I paused, leaning in close to her ear, my voice a whisper only she could hear. That child's last name is Chun, not Foster. Don't you ever use him to discuss me again. A violent tremor ran through Sarah's body. Her face went completely white. 3 years ago, she had stood before me, pregnant, and slapped a paternity test on my desk. Liam, the baby, is Alex's. I love him. Let's get a divorce. At that moment, I was pulling all-nighters, buried in a critical project that was supposed to secure a future for her and our child. And she, in my bed, had gotten pregnant by the man I trusted as my right hand. In that instant, my entire world had collapsed. And now, she had the audacity to show up and talk about getting remarried, as if nothing had happened. On what grounds? No, that's not it, Liam. Let me explain. She stammered, frantically reaching for my arm. I took a step back, avoiding her touch. Chloe, I ordered without turning my head. See Ms. Quinn out. From now on, I don't want any unauthorized personnel in this office. Yes, Mr. Foster. Chloe immediately stepped forward, making a polite but firm this-way gesture. Sarah refused to move. Her composure cracked, and she started to make a scene, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. Liam, you can't do this to me. All the years we had together. Noah, our son can't grow up without a father. Your son has a father. I cut her off coldly. His name is Alex Chun. Instead of wasting your time here, I suggest you go find him. He's gone. He took the money and ran. Sarah finally broke down, sobbing. Liam, I really know I was wrong. Just give me one more chance, please. I looked at her tear-streaked face, feeling not a shred of pity, only a profound, biting irony. A chance? I had given her countless chances. When she repeatedly took the money we had bled for and gave it to her deadbeat brother, I tolerated it. When she leaked the business plan, I was preparing for a crucial bid to a competitor, all for her so-called best friend. I tolerated that, too. It wasn't until she was carrying another man's child that my heart finally turned to stone. Security, I said into the intercom on my desk. 2 large security guards entered swiftly. They flanked Sarah, and she began to scream, struggling against their grip. Liam, You think you've won just because you have a new office and a new company? I'm telling you, you don't know anything. You'll regret this. I swear you'll regret this. Her shrieks echoed down the hall before being cut off by the heavy, soundproofed door swinging shut. Silence returned to the office. Chloe handed me a glass of water. Mr. Foster, don't let irrelevant people upset you. I took the glass, my gaze fixed on the clouds churning outside the window, my expression darkening. Regret? Sarah, you will never know that for the last 3 years, the one thing I've been waiting for is this day. The game is just beginning. Sarah's appearance was like a stone dropped into a calm lake. It didn't cause a tidal wave, but the ripples spread. At the end of our video conference, my business partner, Jasmine Calloway, mentioned it with practiced casualness. Liam, I heard your ex-wife paid you a visit today. Jasmine was the daughter of the Calloway Group dynasty and my most important partner. Her intelligence network was second to none, so I wasn't surprised she knew. Just someone from a past life, I said, dismissing it. A past life. Jasmine chuckled on the other end of the line, her tone rich with meaning. I heard she made such a scene the entire floor could hear. Liam, sometimes mercy to your enemies is cruelty to yourself. I closed my laptop, Jasmine's words echoing in my ears. I had no intention of being merciful. After being thrown out of my office, Sarah didn't give up. My phone was soon under siege from an endless barrage of her calls and texts. Liam, let's just meet. Once. I know you still love me. You wouldn't still be using our old phone number otherwise. Noah's sick. He has a high fever, and he keeps asking for his daddy. Can you really be so heartless as to ignore him? I read the messages and scoffed. I kept the number because it was tied to too many critical business accounts to be worth the hassle of changing. As for the child she mentioned, he had absolutely nothing to do with me. I blocked her number, but she quickly found a new one and continued the harassment. Then, she started showing up downstairs from my condo building. She would stand by the entrance for hours, wearing a faded, worn-out dress and holding a sickly-looking child, trying to create a public spectacle of my cruelty. A few of my neighbors who didn't know the story started giving me dirty looks. See, that's him. The guy who abandoned his wife and child. What a piece of work. He looks so successful. You'd never think he could be so cold-hearted. I had my lawyer serve her with a cease and desist and file for a restraining order. That kept her away for a few days. I thought she might finally give up, but I had underestimated her shamelessness. Tonight, I had just parked my car in the underground garage and was heading for the elevator when a dark figure darted out from behind a concrete pillar and latched onto my leg. It was Sarah. She was still holding the child. Liam, you finally decided to see me, she cried, a mess of tears and snot, looking utterly pathetic. I scowled, trying to shake her off, but her grip was like a vice. Let go, I said, my voice laced with anger. I won't. Not until you promise to save our son. She looked up, her face a wreck of tears and desperation. Liam, look, his name is Noah. I named him that to always remember you. He's your son. She pushed the child in her arms toward me. The boy was about 2. His face was sallow and yellowish, his lips had a bluish tint, and his breathing was shallow. He did look seriously ill, but I remembered the paternity test from 3 years ago with perfect clarity. The probability of parentage excluded, 99. 99%. Sarah, are you done with the theatrics? I stared at her coldly. Trying to pass off another man's kid as mine? Don't you feel disgusted with yourself? My words were a knife, twisting deep into her heart. She froze, as if she never expected me to be so ruthless. No, he's yours. She tried to argue. Just then, the child in her arms began to cough violently. His small face turned red, and then his body convulsed, his eyes rolling back into his head as he passed out. Noah, what's wrong with you? Sarah panicked, shaking the boy frantically, but he was limp and unresponsive. She snapped her head up to look at me, her eyes wild with despair, as if I were her last and only hope. Liam, save him. I'm begging you, save him. As she spoke, her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the cold concrete floor, still clutching the child, and simply knelt there, broken. The air in the garage seemed to freeze. I looked at the weeping woman on the ground and the lifeless child in her arms, feeling not a shred of compassion, only a cold, desolate emptiness. I knew this was just another one of her manipulative schemes. But this time, the life of a child was her bargaining chip. 3 in the end, I took the boy to the hospital. It wasn't out of pity. I couldn't let a child die in front of me, and I certainly wasn't going to give Sarah the opportunity to use a tragedy to blackmail me. On the way, I had Chloe handle everything. Admissions, contacting specialists, arranging the best private room. All expenses were to be charged to my personal account, but she was to keep a detailed record of every cent. It was a loan. Chloe was ruthlessly efficient. The moment we arrived at the hospital, the child was rushed into the emergency room. Sarah sat on a bench in the hallway, looking lost, her hands twisting in her lap as she muttered, "He'll be fine. Noah will be fine." I stood a short distance away, watching her impassively, and that's when someone we never expected to see showed up. Alex Chun. He was dressed in designer clothes, his hair slicked back with gel. On his arm was a woman dripping with jewelry, and they were laughing as they walked out of a VIP suite down the hall. The moment he saw Sarah, his smile froze on his face. Sarah saw him too. She flew into a rage, launching herself at him and grabbing the collar of his shirt. "Alex Chun, you son of a bitch!" she screamed hysterically. "You have a nerve to show your face. Noah is dying. Give me back my money." Alex, startled, shoved her away in disgust. "Are you insane, Sarah? Stop making a scene in the middle of a hospital." The woman with him looked Sarah up and down with contempt, pinching her nose. "Alex, darling, who is this? She's dressed like a vagrant. Just some crazy bitch. Pay her no mind," Alex said, comforting his new girlfriend. He turned back to Sarah, his voice filled with annoyance. "Didn't I make things clear to you? It's over between us. Stop bothering me." "Over." His callousness pushed Sarah over the edge. "Alex, Noah is your son. You found someone new, and now you're trying to abandon him." At those words, the faces of both Alex and his companion changed. "What the hell are you talking about?" Alex's reaction was even more violent than Sarah's. He grabbed her by the throat, slamming her against the wall, his face a mask of rage. "Don't you know whose bastard that is?" he snarled. "If it wasn't for your money, I never would have touched you. Now that you're broke, you think you can pin him on me? In your dreams. Get out of my life, or I'll kill you." He threw her to the ground, wrapped his arm around his frightened girlfriend, and walked away without a backward glance. The hallway was silent, save for Sarah's hopeless sobs as she lay crumpled on the floor. Alex's words were like a bucket of ice water, extinguishing the last of her delusions. "Don't you know whose bastard that is?" That was clearly more than just an angry outburst. After a long time, Sarah slowly lifted her head and looked at me. Her eyes were empty, all her support systems gone. In this vast, turbulent ocean, I was the only piece of driftwood in sight. "Liam." Her voice was a hoarse, desperate plea. You're all I have left now. Please." She started to crawl toward me, trying to grab onto my pant leg. Just then, the doors to the ER swung open. A doctor in a white coat emerged, his expression grave. "Who are the boy's relatives?" Sarah struggled to her feet. "Doctor, I'm his mother. How is my son?" The doctor adjusted his glasses. "The child is in critical condition," he said grimly. "He has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He needs a bone marrow transplant immediately. We recommend starting with immediate family members for compatibility testing." Bone marrow transplant. The words exploded in the empty hallway like a bomb. Sarah swayed, nearly collapsing again. Her eyes instinctively shot to me, filled with terror and a kind of pleading I couldn't decipher. I met her gaze without expression, a cold sneer forming in my heart. The real show was just about to begin. I agreed to cover the initial costs of the child's treatment, but I made my terms clear. The money was a loan, and Sarah would have to sign a promissory note. She signed it without hesitation. At this point, she would have done anything to save the boy's life. I left Chloe to handle the rest and returned to the office. A multi-billion-dollar merger was at a critical stage, and I didn't have time to waste on Sarah's drama. News from the hospital came quickly. Sarah was not a match for the bone marrow transplant. She called me, weeping, begging me to find Alex and convince him to get tested. "Liam, he won't see me. You're the only one who can get him to come. I'm begging you. I'll owe you for the rest of my life. I'll do anything to repay you." I hung up. "Me, go find that man." The nerve she had. Pushed into a corner, Sarah somehow found Alex's new girlfriend's contact information and started an all-out brawl at the hospital, making a huge public scene. The result was predictable. Alex's bodyguards beat her up and threw her out. With nowhere else to turn, she set her sights on me once again. She managed to slip into my office while Chloe was dropping off some files and immediately fell to her knees in front of me. "Liam, I'm begging you, please get tested." I was reviewing a document and didn't even look up. "Sarah, have you lost your mind?" "No, I'm not crazy." She crawled to my feet, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. "The doctor said there's a small chance a non-relative could be a match. What if it works?" "Liam, just do it as a favor. For old time's sake." "Old time sake." I put down my pen and looked at her, at that face stripped of all dignity. Whatever was between us had turned to ash 3 years ago when she shoved that paternity test in my face and demanded a divorce. "Impossible," I said, my voice flat. "Why? How can you be so cruel?" She shrieked. "That's a human life. Are you just going to stand by and watch him die?" "He's a life, but my mother wasn't." I shot back, each word a hammer blow that landed squarely on Sarah's conscience. Her face went ashen. 3 years ago, a month before she demanded a divorce, my mother had a sudden heart attack and needed emergency surgery. The bill was over $150,000. The company was on the brink, and I didn't have the cash. I begged her to let us use the money her parents had given us for a down payment on a house. And what did she say? That money was a gift from my parents. "We can't touch it. Besides, your mother is a black hole for money. We spend this now, what about next time? Do you want us to have a future or not?" She would rather lend that money to her gambling-addicted brother than use it to save my mother's life. In the end, I was the one who signed a high-stakes financing deal that was practically a deal with the devil, getting an advance on my future profits to pay for the surgery. And now she had the gall to talk to me about saving a life. "Sarah," I said, standing up and walking over to her. "I'm no saint. I don't turn the other cheek. You want me to save that boy? Fine. First, go to my mother's grave, get on your knees, and bow your head to the ground 100 times. Beg for her forgiveness." Sarah was completely stunned. She never thought I would bring that up. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. I ignored her and turned to Chloe, who was standing by the door. "Watch the door. If you let her in again, you can pack your desk and leave with her." Chloe's face paled. She apologized profusely and quickly dragged the shell-shocked Sarah out of my office. Finally, silence. But my mind was a raging storm. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. "I need you to look into someone for me. Sarah Quinn. I want to know everything she's done for the past 3 years. Who she's met, what she's been involved in. I want every single detail." After hanging up, I stared out at the sky, my eyes turning cold. "Sarah, you better pray that child has nothing to do with me. Otherwise, I won't just ruin you. I'll make you pay for everything." A few days later, the private investigator's first report was on my desk. It was even more sordid than I had imagined. Alex Chun was, indeed, a thorough con artist. He not only took all of Sarah's money, but also used her name to rack up massive debts with loan sharks. And Sarah wasn't entirely innocent. To maintain her lavish lifestyle, she had participated in some of his schemes, right up until he cleaned out their accounts and abandoned her. I turned the page with a cold smirk. At the end of the report, the investigator had included a separate manila envelope. "Mr. Foster, there's this. It's about the child. I thought you should see it for yourself." I opened the envelope. Inside were several photographs and a discovery that was more shocking than I could have ever anticipated. 5 inside the envelope were several intimate photos of Sarah with a man I didn't recognize. The pictures were taken at a high-end private club. The man was in his 50s and overweight, but the Patek Philippe on his wrist told me he was extremely wealthy. The photos were dated 2 months before Sarah got pregnant. The investigator's report was clear. The man was Marcus Thorne, the CEO of a publicly traded company. He had died of sudden heart attack a year ago. He and Sarah had been seeing each other, and he had been generous, buying her the Porsche she used to drive. Alex Chun, it seemed, was little more than a boy toy she kept on the side. So the child, whose was he? Once the thought took root, it grew like an invasive vine, choking everything else in my mind. A bone-deep chill washed over me. 3 years ago, Sarah showed me a report and told me the child was Alex's. 3 years later, Alex stood in front of me and called the boy a bastard. And now, there was a Marcus Thorne. Sarah, just how many men were there? The hospital was getting impatient. The boy's condition was worsening. If they couldn't find a suitable donor soon, his fate would be left to chance. Sarah had completely lost it. She called me dozens of times a day, sent hundreds of texts. Her messages were a chaotic mess of insults and pleas, calling me heartless one minute and begging for forgiveness the next. She was on the verge of a complete breakdown. I ignored her. An obsessive need drove me now. I had to know, once and for all, whose child that was. I had Chloe go to the hospital and, under the guise of corporate health screening, get a new blood sample for me. Then, I had the investigator figure out a way to obtain DNA samples from the child and from Alex Shun. The day Alex caused a scene at the hospital, he had tossed a water bottle into a trash can. It was all the evidence we needed. I sent all 3 samples to the most reputable genetics lab in the city. I pulled some strings, demanding they deliver the most accurate report possible in the shortest amount of time. The 2 days I spent waiting for the results were unnervingly calm. The multi-billion-dollar merger, under my leadership, was moving into its final stages. Jasmine was thrilled with my performance and had even hinted at elevating our partnership to a strategic alliance. Everything was moving in the right direction, except for that impending report. 2 afternoons later, I was in a video conference with Jasmine, hammering out the final details of the contract. Chloe knocked and entered, placing a sealed manila envelope gently on my desk. My heart skipped a beat. "Mr. Foster, the results are in," she said quietly. I motioned for Jasmine to hold on, then picked up the envelope. It was thin, just a few pages, but it felt as heavy as lead. I tore open the seal and pulled out the reports. My eyes skipped past the complex charts and genetic markers, landing on the final conclusions. There were 2 reports. One was for the child and Alex Chen. The conclusion, paternity excluded. The other was for the child and me. I stared at the final line of text, my pupils contracting, the blood freezing in my veins. On the screen, Jasmine noticed my strange reaction. "Liam, what is it? What happened?" I slowly lifted my head and looked at her on the monitor, a bizarre smile spreading across my face. "It's nothing," I said. The game just got a lot more interesting, because the conclusion of the second report was identical. Paternity excluded. The child wasn't mine, and he wasn't Alex's, which left only one possible answer. Marcus Thorne. 6. I stared at the 2 reports in my hand. The last flicker of emotion inside me extinguished, replaced by a cold, thrilling sense of clarity. "Sarah, you really outdid yourself. The child wasn't mine, and he wasn't Alex's. That meant he could only belong to the late tycoon, Marcus Thorne, a hidden and extremely valuable, illegitimate son." Meanwhile, Sarah's public smear campaign against me was escalating. She had found a few bottom-feeder bloggers to spread stories about how I had abandoned my wife and child and was heartlessly wealthy. The articles were written with crocodile tears, accompanied by photos of her weeping in a hospital corner while holding the sick child. They were surprisingly effective at garnering sympathy. A handful of self-righteous protesters even started showing up outside my office building with signs calling me a deadbeat dad. Through it all, I said nothing. Jasmine asked if I needed her corporate PR team to intervene. I declined. This was a minor squall I could handle myself. I had the investigator dig into Marcus Thorne's family. After his death, Thorne's company was taken over by his wife and their 2 sons. The family was known for being ruthless in business and having zero tolerance for Marcus's many affairs. They had no idea this grandson existed. A perfect opening. I had Chloe send an invitation to the Thorne family under the official letterhead of Far Harbor Capital. The invitation stated that we needed to discuss a matter concerning an important part of Mr. Marcus Thorne's legacy. They replied quickly, and a time was set. For the location, I chose a highly exclusive private club. Then I called Sarah. It was the first time I had initiated contact with her in 3 years. When she answered, she was so shocked and overjoyed that her voice trembled. "Liam, tomorrow, 3 p.m., the Oak Room at the Sentinel Club. We need to talk about the boy," I said, keeping it brief. "Okay, yes, I'll be there," she stammered, ecstatic. She probably thought her pity party and media blitz had finally worked, and I was ready to take her back. I hung up and looked out the window, the corner of my mouth curling into an icy smile. "Sarah, You wanted a father to pay for your son's medical bills? Fine. I'll find you one. In fact, I'll find you a set of grandparents. The next afternoon, I arrived at the club early. In the private room, Marcus Thorne's widow, Eleanor, and his eldest son, Julian, were already waiting. Eleanor Thorne was a remarkably well-preserved woman in her late 50s. She radiated an air of old-money elegance, but the shrewd, appraising look in her eyes warned you not to underestimate her. Julian looked a bit like his father, with an arrogant demeanor and the slick polish of a corporate shark. Mr. Foster, a pleasure, Eleanor began politely. I'm curious about this important legacy of my late husband you mentioned. Instead of answering directly, I slid a folder across the table to her. Mrs. Thorne, please take a look at this first. Inside was all the evidence my investigator had compiled on Sarah's affair with Marcus, as well as the 2 brand-new DNA reports. As they read, the expressions on Eleanor and Julian's faces grew progressively darker. When they reached the final DNA report confirming the child's blood relation to Marcus Thorne, Eleanor's hand began to shake. She slammed it on the table, her eyes flashing with fury. That shameless bitch! How dare she? At that exact moment, the door to the room opened. Sarah walked in, her face full of hope. She had dressed up for the occasion, her makeup meticulously applied, wanting me to see her at her best. Liam. She stopped short when she saw Eleanor and Julian sitting across from me. The smile froze on her face. She didn't know who they were, but she could feel the hostility in the air. I stood up, a polite smile on my face. Sarah, come in. There are some people I'd like you to meet. I gestured toward the stone-faced Eleanor and the furious Julian, enunciating each word with chilling precision. This is Mrs. Eleanor Thorne, the widow of the late Marcus Thorne. And this is his eldest son, Mr. Julian Thorne, also known as the biological grandfather and grandmother of your son, Noah. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. The blood drained from her face, and she stood there as if she'd been struck by lightning, completely frozen. She stared at me in disbelief, her lips trembling, unable to form a single word. I slowly sat back down, picked up my teacup, and gently blew on the steam. Let the show begin. The silence in the room was suffocating. Eleanor Thorne's icy gaze was fixed on Sarah, as if she were mentally dissecting her. So you're Sarah Quinn, she said finally, her voice low but carrying an authority that was impossible to ignore. Sarah trembled under her stare, instinctively taking a step back. I don't know you. Who are you people? She stammered, turning to me for help. Liam, what is going on? I didn't even bother to look at her, focusing instead on the subtle notes of the oolong tea. What's going on? Julian Thorne shot to his feet, his temper far shorter than his mother's. He pointed a finger at Sarah. You shameless gold digger, parading my father's bastard son around, trying to extort money from Mr. Foster. Did you think the Thorne family was just going to let that happen? No, that's not true. Sarah waved her hands frantically, her face a deathly white. The child is. He's Liam's. Even now, she was trying to lie. Is he? I set down my cup and finally spoke. I took the copy of my own DNA report and tossed it onto the floor in front of her, as if it were trash. Sarah, open your eyes and read it. That's the report for me and the boy. The conclusion. Paternity excluded. Are you going to keep this act up? That single sheet of paper was the final straw that broke her. She collapsed to the floor, her face ashen. It was over. Everything was over. Eleanor sneered. She had already recovered from her initial shock and was back in her element as a corporate matriarch. Tell us what you want, she said, looking down at the crumpled figure on the floor. Money? Or were you hoping to use the child to marry into the Thorne family? As if grabbing a lifeline, Sarah scrambled on her knees toward Eleanor. Mrs. Thorne, I don't want anything. I just want you to save the boy, she cried. He's so sick, he needs a bone marrow transplant. He's your flesh and blood. Our flesh and blood. Eleanor's gaze turned colder. A bastard you conceived while sleeping around. You think he's worthy of the Thorne name? What is he to you? A bargaining chip. Just then, the door opened again. 2 men in dark suits and sunglasses entered, followed by a lawyer carrying a briefcase. The Thornes were even more efficient than I'd anticipated. The lawyer walked up to Sarah and presented her with a document. Ms. Quinn, this is an agreement we've drafted. The Thorne family will cover all of the child's medical expenses and will provide for his future. The condition is that you must relinquish all custodial and visitation rights. From this day forward, you will have no contact with him. Sarah stared at the agreement, dumbfounded. Relinquish her rights? Never see her son again? No, I won't sign it, she shrieked. He's my son. You can't take him from me. Eleanor stood, walked over, and slapped her hard across the face. Your son? The moment you decided to use him as a tool for your scams, you forfeited your right to be a mother. Eleanor's eyes were filled with nothing but contempt. Sarah completely shattered. She clutched her face, sobbing on the floor. Then she snapped her head up, her eyes burning with a venomous hatred directed entirely at me. Liam, this was you. You set this all up, she screamed hysterically. Why would you do this to me? All I wanted was to get back together with you. I finally rose, walked over, and crouched down to meet her gaze. Get back together? I laughed, but the smile never reached my eyes. Sarah, from the day you tried to pass off another man's child as mine 3 years ago, the only thing left between us were debts. I leaned in, my voice a whisper only she could hear. And now, it's time to settle the accounts. One by one. The 2 bodyguards stepped forward, lifted Sarah from the floor, and blocked the exit. The lawyer once again held out the pen and the agreement. To sign or not to sign, she no longer had a choice. Her eyes, full of despair and malice, were locked on mine. Liam Foster, you will regret this. In the end, Sarah signed the papers. Faced with the absolute power of the Thorne family, her resistance was meaningless. The Thornes left with the agreement and a nearly catatonic Sarah. They had the child transferred to a private hospital with much tighter security that same day. The next morning, every negative story about me online had vanished. In their place were heartwarming articles about the Thorne Group recovering a long-lost grandson. In this new drama, I was cast as the innocent ex-husband, an unfortunate bystander caught in the crossfire. Public opinion reversed completely. I was now a sympathetic figure, and Sarah was a deceitful, manipulative villain. Everything had gone according to plan. With the storm over, the multi-billion-dollar merger was officially signed. That evening, Jasmine and I were celebrating on the rooftop terrace of my office building. That was a masterstroke, Liam. Pulling the rug out from under her like that, Jasmine said, swirling a glass of red wine as she watched me. You didn't just solve your problem, you put the Thorne family in your debt. They'll probably have to give you a sweetheart deal on that downtown redevelopment project now. I just smiled. Putting them in my debt? No, I was just taking back what was mine. Still, Jasmine said, changing the subject, you're just going to let Sarah Quinn walk away? I don't think she's the type to go quietly. Of course not, I said, taking a sip of wine, my eyes dark. For Sarah, losing her son and her last lifeline was just the beginning. The real bill for what she owed me hadn't even been presented yet. Just then, my phone rang. It was the private investigator. Mr. Foster, I've got something new, he said, his voice excited. I kept digging on Alex Chun. Turns out, he and Sarah did more than just steal your money. They used your old company's name to sign several phantom contracts, defrauding a partner out of a huge advance. It's enough money to put them both in prison for a very long time. The smile on my face deepened. Compile all the evidence and send it to me. Will do, Mr. Foster. The investigator paused. One more thing. After signing the agreement, Sarah got a $500,000 severance payment from the Thornes and then disappeared. My guys lost her trail. Don't worry about it, I said. She'll resurface on her own. When I hung up, Jasmine looked at me curiously. A new plot twist? I shook my head. No, it's time for the curtain to fall. As if on cue, my phone rang again. A blocked number. I answered. On the other end, I heard Sarah's voice, cold and unhinged. Liam, I have nothing left. My son is gone, the money is gone. You must be feeling pretty proud of yourself right now, aren't you? Her voice was a poison blade, dripping with resentment. But don't think you've won. I have a gift for you. A very special gift. One I know you're going to absolutely love. She let out a wild laugh and hung up. Almost simultaneously, my other phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications from my financial news app. A banner alert flashed across the screen. FAR Harbor Capital accused of financial fraud. Sensitive data leaked. Stock plummets at opening bell. Sarah's gift had arrived. 9 Sarah's revenge was more vicious than I expected. and far more foolish. She still had some old files from my first company. Combining that outdated information with the scamming techniques she'd picked up from Alex, she concocted a package of falsified evidence and fed it to a short-selling firm, launching a perfectly timed, fatal strike at the very peak of my merger success. Panic ripped through the market. Rumors spread like wildfire. In the first 30 minutes after the opening bell, Far Harbor Capital stock was hammered straight into a trading halt. My office descended into chaos. The phone lines were jammed. Partners were calling in, demanding answers. Even the Callaway Group, which had just signed the contract, was under immense pressure. Liam, what do we do? We have to halt trading and issue a press release immediately. Jasmine's face was grim as we stood in the war room. No. I stared at the vertical green line on the monitor, my expression unervingly calm. Halting trading will only create more panic. They want to sell? Let them. I want to see how much ammunition they really have. My composure caught everyone off guard. But, no buts, I cut Jasmine off, turning to my head of IT. Trace the data source. I want to know which firm is behind this in 30 minutes. I then looked at my head of PR. Prepare for press conference. 1 hour. I'm going live to the world. My unorthodox commands stunned the room, but my unwavering gaze spurred them into action. Jasmine pulled me aside. Liam, what's your play here? She asked in a low voice. This is a well-funded, premeditated attack. Sarah couldn't have done this alone. Of course she couldn't, I sneered. She's just a knife in someone else's hand. A disposable one. I looked at Jasmine and said, my voice steady, did you really think all I've been doing for the last 3 years was building one investment firm? The Far Harbor Capital that Sarah knew was merely the tip of the iceberg. 3 years ago, after she betrayed me and left me with nothing, I learned a valuable lesson. Never put all your eggs in one basket. For the past 3 years, I had operated Far Harbor in the open, drawing everyone's attention. But in reality, my core assets, my most advanced tech patents, and my most profitable ventures were all housed under a different company, registered offshore, with no legal ties to Far Harbor whatsoever. The company that Sarah and her powerful backers were so desperately trying to destroy was nothing more than a shell I was prepared to discard at any moment. And now, they were spending their own real money to help me do it. It was perfect. 30 minutes later, the head of IT burst in. Mr. Foster, we've got them. It's Ironclad Capital. They're buying up all the shares we're dumping. Ironclad Capital, our biggest competitor in the merger deal. I knew it. Good, I nodded. Let them buy. Let them have it all. An hour later, the press conference began. I walked onto the stage alone, facing a sea of flashing cameras and the skeptical eyes of the press. I know you all have a lot of questions, I began, speaking without notes. Regarding the rumors of financial fraud and data leaks at Far Harbor Capital, I am here to state 3 things. First, the so-called evidence being circulated is entirely fabricated or outdated. Far Harbor's financial health is, and has always been, impeccable. Second, we have obtained conclusive proof of malicious market manipulation and slander by Ironclad Capital and other associated parties. We will be pursuing all available legal avenues to the fullest extent. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. I ignored them and delivered the final, most important point. Third, and most critically, effective today, Far Harbor Capital will begin a process of internal restructuring. I, myself, will be spearheading a new team and a new venture focused on the next frontier of technological innovation. As I spoke, a new company logo and a presentation slide appeared on the screen behind me. This was my real ace. Then I dropped the final fatal bomb. I held up a folder of documents for all the cameras to see. Furthermore, regarding the originator of this malicious attack, Ms. Sarah Quinn, and her accomplice, Mr. Alex Chun, it has come to our attention that 3 years ago, they used their positions at my former company to embezzle funds and engage in commercial fraud, with the total amount exceeding $10 million. I looked directly into the cameras, my voice cold and clear as steel. Just before this press conference began, I submitted all of the evidence to the police. As the words left my mouth, I knew that on the other side of the city, at the headquarters of Ironclad Capital and in the squalid apartment where Sarah was hiding, the real show was just getting started. My press conference was a depth charge that sent shockwaves through the entire financial industry. The moment I announced the restructuring and revealed my true ace in the hole, the stock price of the Far Harbor shell became irrelevant. Everyone's attention was captured by the far grander and more lucrative technological vision I laid out. And when I dropped the evidence of Sarah and Alex's crimes, the narrative shifted from a corporate battle to a criminal investigation. Ironclad Capital's stock imploded. Their hostile short-selling campaign was put under immediate investigation by the SEC, and their top executives were taken into custody. As for Sarah, her luck had finally run out. The police found her in the dark, damp apartment she had been hiding in. When they arrested her, she was still staring at the live stream of my press conference on her phone, her face a mask of disbelief and total collapse. The evidence against her and Alex was ironclad. A long prison sentence awaited them both. The dust settled. A few days later, word came from the Thorne family. The boy had successfully undergone a bone marrow transplant with a donation from a distant relative overseas. He was in recovery. His life would go on, completely separate from Sarah's. Everything had arrived at its proper conclusion. I stood in my office at the top of One Vanderbilt, looking out over the city at night. The lights were a dazzling river, the traffic a constant, flowing pulse. Jasmine came and stood beside me, handing me a glass of champagne. "It's over," she said. "Yes, it's over," I replied, taking the glass. We stood in silence for a long time, just watching the city lights. Finally, Jasmine raised her glass to me. "To the past," she said with a smile. I looked into her bright eyes and shook my head. I gently touched my glass to hers, the clean, crisp sound echoing in the quiet of the night. "No," I said. "To the future."